The biggest bear you've ever seen a photo of is now closer to average in 3 specific parts of Alaska. That's not clickbait. That's what field weights, skull scores, and trail cam frames from the last decade have quietly built. You were taught Kodiak set the ceiling, and the ceiling doesn't move. The ceiling moved. Salmon shifted, seasons stretched, hunting pressure eased in specific units, and one recent measurement broke a record most guides said couldn't break again. 4 cases ahead. One weighed, one filmed, one buried in agency language, one that forces you to rethink what a grizzly even is. Start with the bear that was weighed. Southwest Alaska, coastal capture, a small crew doing what looked like a routine workup on a sedated brown bear. The scale reading came in high enough that one of them thought the dial was wrong and asked to reset it. It wasn't wrong. The number held. And here's the part that matters more than the number itself. That bear wasn't from Kodiak, wasn't the oldest bear the crew had ever worked, wasn't the biggest skull anyone had ever taped by every measure. It was, in the context of that specific watershed, a solid adult male, not the outlier, the median. Sit with that for a second. In a salmon-dense drainage on the Alaska Peninsula, the monster bear of 20 years ago now describes what walks past the same weir every August. The old ceiling wasn't fantasy. It came from real fieldwork, real capture data, real scored skulls from a specific era. But the diet fueling those bears has changed. Sockeye returns to certain systems have run high through most of the last decade. Pink runs have exceeded forecast in specific bays. The bears in those drainages aren't a different animal. They're the same animal, eating for longer, with more calories, in less pressured habitat. If the outlier is now the median, one question follows on its own. What does the top end look like now? One weighed bear is a data point. A decade of trail cam frames from one drainage is a pattern. That's where the second case sits. Picture a lodge guide on the Alaska Peninsula who's been running cameras on the same bait sites and game trails for close to 20 years. He knows the height of every downed spruce he uses as a reference. He knows the diameter of every steel drum. He knows the shoulder height of the boars that have walked through his frames since he was renting cameras and burning through AA batteries. And one October, a frame comes back that his own veteran clients cannot agree on. Half say the bear is closer than it looks. Half say the reference is wrong. One says it's a trick of the lens. The guide says nothing for a while because he's already checked. Here's where honest skepticism has to land hard. Most monster bear photos that circulate online collapse under this exact test. A wide-angle lens throws a foreground bear against a background object and produces something that looks like a size the animal isn't. A late-season boar carrying its winter fat looks a foot taller than the same bear in June. A bait drum at an unknown distance is not a reference at all. Say all of that out loud, then look at what survives. What survives in that specific drainage is a cluster of frames, not one frame, from consecutive years, with real reference points showing bears whose shoulder-to-drum ratio doesn't budge no matter how you rotate the analysis. The frame mattered, but it wasn't the frame that changed the case. It was the pattern of frames from watersheds where salmon escapement has climbed for 15 straight seasons. If you've watched a size floor move on your own cameras, the drainage, the unit, the frame you can't explain, that's the story I want you to leave in the comments. Not because one frame will solve it, because the pattern will. One guide's cameras are a pattern. An entire coast's record book being quietly rewritten is a different order of thing. Talk to the guide outfitter culture on Kodiak or along the Alaska Peninsula, and you'll hear the same shape of story from people who don't know each other. Skull scores that used to be once-a-decade events are showing up more often. The threshold that used to separate trophy of a lifetime from very good bear isn't gone, but the distribution behind it has shifted. Ask why, and the honest answer isn't mysterious. It's food, time, and pressure. Coastal Alaskan brown bears live on top of one of the densest wild-caught protein pipelines on the planet. Multiple salmon species overlap through summer and fall. Add a warming shoulder season that extends the productive feeding window on both ends. Add hunting pressure regimes inside places like Katmai and McNeil River that keep specific bears alive long enough to reach the ages when brown bears actually get big. Interior grizzlies never had any of that. They live on roots, ground squirrels, moose calves in spring, and the occasional lucky day at a caribou carcass. They stay small. They were always going to stay small. The old ceiling wasn't wrong for them. It just described the wrong coast. Now watch how the paperwork moves. Read enough Alaska Department of Fish and Game bulletins, National Park Service Katmai updates, and Fish and Wildlife brown bear language from the last 15 years, and the framing softens. What was once described as exceptional individual bears in a few standout units gets described more often as consistently large populations in specific salmon-rich systems. That's not a scandal. There's no cover-up. It's a paperwork lag catching up to a food web. The compromise matters. This is not happening statewide. An interior bear near the Brooks Range is still a lean animal by coastal standards. What's happening is regional, and the region is defined by a food base. The record book didn't get broken by one bear. It got quietly rewritten by a coast. A food belt explanation is comfortable. It explains itself. The fourth case is the one that doesn't stay inside the food belt. Every so often a report comes back from an interior or northern zone, a bush pilot flying a familiar drainage, a pipeline worker on a corridor patrol, a hunter with a tag in a unit that never produced large bears, describing a brown bear that has no biological right to be that size in that place. The old field notes for those zones describe a smaller, leaner animal. So what's happening? Two twists. Take them in order. The first is the boring one, and the boring one is usually right. Salmon runs in some interior systems have pushed farther upriver than they used to reach. Moose densities have changed in specific game management units. Berry seasons have lengthened. A brown bear that lives inside those changed inputs is not a mutant. It's a coastal bear's diet in an interior bear's postal code. Same species, different table. The second twist is the one that has to be handled carefully because it's real and it's rare and it does not explain most of what people are seeing. In documented cases along the northern range, where brown bear range now overlaps polar bear range in ways it didn't a generation ago, confirmed hybrid bears have been recorded. The DNA is real. The animals are real, and they're a footnote, not the story. The story is that what a grizzly is here is a moving target at the northern edge because the range itself is moving, which brings you to the actual answer to the title. Impossible size is a category error. The old ceiling assumed a specific food base, a specific climate, and a specific hunting pressure regime. Those inputs no longer describe several very specific Alaskan watersheds. When you change the inputs, the animal changes with them. Biology never promised the ceiling was fixed. The ceiling was a description of one moment and the moment ended. So here's the framework I want to travel with you the next time somebody sends you a photo captioned, "Biggest bear in Alaska." Ask whether there's a measured weight or a scored skull or just a photo. Ask what the scale reference is and whether you can verify it. Ask who the witness is and what their track record looks like. A guide with 20 years on the same drainage is not the same witness as a stranger with a phone. Ask whether the location sits inside a salmon-dense, low-pressure watershed where the biology supports the claim. Ask whether the local agency's own language has shifted over the last decade in that unit, and then run the honest skeptical filters: lens distortion, foreground trickery, guide incentive, misidentified late-season fat bores, and see what survives. What survives is the map being redrawn. Here's one testable step, and it will take you an evening. Pull up ADF and G's own game management unit reports for the coastal brown bear units. Pull up Boone and Crockett's Alaska brown bear entries by decade. Look at the density of top-scoring entries from the last 20 years against the 20 before that. Then pull up NOAA salmon escapement data for the same coastal drainages over the same window. Line the two up on the same page. I don't need to tell you what the correlation looks like. You'll see it. That's the point. and a few honest trade-offs because the story doesn't work without them. Agencies stay cautious with record language because a confirmed record drives hunting pressure, tag politics, and tourism claims. That's an institutional reality, not suppression. Guides and outfitters have a real incentive to make the bear in the photo sound bigger than it is, and some of them do. Skeptics who dismiss random monster bear photos on the internet are usually right on any given frame. None of that changes what the residue looks like when you filter it honestly. The residue is the story. If you've hunted, guided, flown, or lived a season in a specific Alaskan unit and watched the size floor move in your own lifetime, drop the unit and the drainage in the comments. That's the data that doesn't make it into the summary maps. Someone reading is trying to make sense of a frame from the same water. The ceiling on Alaskan bear size was written for a specific coast, a specific salmon regime, a specific hunting era. Those inputs moved. The animal moved with them. Impossible size is really, the paperwork hasn't caught up to the food web. Trust your eyes when the evidence stacks. Stay honest about the viral photos that don't survive the filters. And if you want the same lens on another North American species whose official story stopped matching the ground truth a long time ago, the next video is where to go.